Hello and welcome to another video. A couple weeks behind on this training update. Just been really busy with training and life and everything like that, and been a bit lazy in terms of making more content. But as far as training has been going, mostly pretty good for the most part. I mean, as good as a hypertrophy volume phase can kind of go. Squats have been moving well. I've been steadily kind of increasing those numbers, hitting a couple more PRs as we're going along, which is nice. Mainly just volume PRs. In this video, you'll see that I hit a nice 5:45 for a set of 5. It's not actually a PR, but pretty close to my previous PR, and hoping to beat that as we finish out this next training block. Couple of struggles with the deadlift, but actually in this clip you'll see that I was able to hit 705 for 4 with calibrated plates, something I've only done before on pound plates. This is a really good sign for me because my volume tends to be really far away from my absolute strength. I hadn't pulled 700 for multiple reps before pulling 777, so this is a good indication that my strength should be comfortably over 800 at this point. And once we kind of get rid of that fatigue, I'll be able to push towards some bigger numbers there and kind of see where that takes us. But on the whole, really good. Really happy with how bench is moving. Close grip bench is becoming more comfortable, as is the increased volume on my comp bench. So that's all very, very good. So on to the topic of this video. So the topic for this week is going to be kind of about finding your form and kind of dealing with some of those setbacks that you might have in training. A bit of background to this. For a long time I've been really struggling with some back issues. I'm 6'7", so obviously from a powerlifting standpoint that makes things quite difficult. My movement has to be quite unique to accommodate my size. And when I kind of got into powerlifting, one of the main issues I was dealing with was a compressed disc in my lower back and some scoliosis, and then ultimately some sciatica as a result of both of those things. And so kind of to deal with that, I did a lot of back training initially, and that was able to just generally improve my day-to-day ability to move and feel comfortable in general. But this didn't really carry over too well into powerlifting after that initial beginner phase. Once I started getting into more maximal loads, I ran into some issues. Obviously I made a big switch from conventional to sumo, and this was able to kind of accommodate some of those problems. But I really think the biggest thing for me in terms of addressing this was there's three main things, so I'll go ahead and break those down. The first thing would be mobility, recovery, and just being able to be strong in all of those positions. I kind of lump that together as one thing, but it's a couple things. But really, the mobility aspect of that is just making sure that you're able to get into a comfortable position during all 3 of the lifts. You can see as I squat, I kind of fold over quite a lot. This is something that's pretty much unavoidable with my specific hip structure, body type, all of those things. I can't squat very wide without causing hip pain, and I have very good ankle mobility, so I tend to prefer to squat narrow to try and take advantage of my quads. And this has been probably the best way of just coping with things for me. But kind of as a result of that specific movement, I've needed to get more hip flexibility so that I'm able to stay a tad bit more upright. Not a ton, but a little bit more. And so kind of working on those things, doing some more core stability exercises, different things like that has been really important for me. And so then the next thing with that would be recovery. So just making sure that I'm not pushing my volume too much. I'm doing a lot of volume at the moment, but I'm definitely not going above my maximum recoverable volume, or probably not even getting close to it. I just think that for me personally, there's just far too much risk involved of kind of tipping that balance. If I hit too much volume, it's just going to send me back. And you have to think about the fact that every session you do has a knock-on effect to the next session. So if you go too hard in one session, that might mean that the next session is complete garbage. And, kind of eventually you do get into the habit of wasting workouts from that sense. But I think that definitely has made a big difference, just having that mobility. And then I think the second thing would be, I I hate to say strengthening your weak points, but essentially just building up your weaknesses. So once you've kind of gained that additional range of motion, the key thing there is to then strengthen that range of motion. So if you get really, really good ankle dorsiflexion, then you need to take advantage of it and consistently practice it. Otherwise, that mobility is going to be all for nothing. And so then really designing my movement around my flexibility, around my mobility, that's allowed me to take advantage of some of those things. So I think that would be more prominent in my deadlift, switching to sumo, and then really just finding a comfortable technique that works for me and allows me to take advantage of my improved mobility has made a huge, huge difference to me. And then I think the third thing is just really individualization. Your lifts shouldn't and won't look like anybody else. I think comparing yourself to other people has a huge detriment to it, and that's that you're assuming that you're on a level playing field, and really no one is. There's so many different factors involved, from genetics to your work-life balance and all of those things that have an impact on how you train, how consistent you can train, and how much you can train. And so I think the biggest thing for me has really just been accepting that my deadlift is never going to look like Yuri Belkin's, and my squat is never going to look like, anyone's squat that has an efficient squat, and my bench press is always going to look weird because just the length of my limbs makes it difficult for me to really fit inside of a barbell. And so I think, one of the things that you'll notice if you look back at my training is that I really just continually adapted my form to fit my body type as best as I can, and I've really just focused on creating my own style in all three of the lifts. I definitely think there's room to model your technique on other people, but it's really limited by your personal abilities and the mobility aspects of your own body. So tying in with what I mentioned about individualizing your technique, the next big step in terms of overall individualization is individualizing your programming, whether this means having a coach, whether this means writing your own programming, I can't say that word, or just taking a program that you find online and customizing it to fit your needs. As I mentioned, I've always kind of understood that my fatigue level is going to be a lot lower than a lot of other lifters. So when I was doing those kind of copy and paste programs, like Johnny Canduto's program, for example, I would never do it exactly as he suggested. I would take some things out, I would put some things in, just to meet my own personal needs. For me, I find it very difficult to do heavy conventional as well as heavy sumo. It puts a lot of pressure on my back, in combination with squats as well. So that's not really something that I would do at the same time. I might do snatch grip deadlifts instead. So it's really just finding that and feeling that out. It takes a lot of time to do that, but the more cognizant of it that you are, the greater your ability to recognize that those issues exist and alter them before they become too problematic. Because if those things do build up, then it can cause long-term issues and knock-on effects. And really the biggest thing with anyone's training is that you want to stay healthy for as long as you can. That's really where all that progress is going to be made. Very, very difficult to make progress when you're making technical changes and when you're recovering from an injury. And I think the final caveat to all of this is, don't be afraid to take a step back. I think a lot of people are really, really considerate of getting to that next level and progressing as much as possible. And I think that's really, really important. But at the same time, a big aspect of that is just taking a step back. For me, it was realizing that conventional wasn't going to work for me, and not being afraid to say, I've reached this 600-pound deadlift, but now I have to just take a step back, and I'm going to have to switch to sumo, because ultimately my ability to walk, my ability to bend down is way, way, way more important than my ability to pick up 600 pounds. And also kind of understanding that, I can pick up 600 pounds now, but how much am I going to be able to pick up in 3, 6, or 9 months' time? If I continue to train like this, if I continue to put myself in this position week in, week out, it's just not going to work. And so taking that step back, starting sumo, it took me 6 months, I would say, to get back to where I was with my conventional. That isn't a super long period of time, but it's definitely a sacrifice, and it's definitely time that I wish I could have put into my lifts. But I am very grateful that I had that injury. I'm very grateful that I was able to look at it in a positive way and say, I can make this change, and ultimately it's going to impact me more beneficially in the future. So I think from this video, all I want you to take away is that it's going to be unique to you. Your whole journey, your whole process, your whole training experience is going to be 100% unique to you. And that needs to be recognized in your training, in your movement, in your recovery, in your diet, and everything that you do. It needs to be personalized, customized, and fit for you. Thank you for watching. I will be back next week on time, hopefully. Thank you.